So hello everybody, I'm Nina. I have today Alex and Stan with me. We will be exploring how to Google in any professional field. So I'm using Google products for business since 2011, and I'm now Google Plus level 3 proficient, and I'm also on the circadians. I like any aspect of improving our digital skills for better results in business, for better human-to-human relations, to improve our life. Do you hear any noise? Because I hear it's breaking.
Well, for me, it's fine. I hear you well.
Okay.
I mute myself while you're speaking. That way, it'll cut down on the noise on my typing because I'm taking notes while we're talking here.
Oh my God. So I have a few notes. Actually, there are a lot of aspects of the development of Google. It's already 14 years around us. Some of the new generations
I think you've dropped out.
Already users. And I'm very interested to learn more about this gap in technology and professional activities in any industry, because the technology is moving very fast and we have this always more to learn about it and more to implement in our daily work. So Alex, please introduce yourself and tell us about what's happening with technology and communication in your industry.
Hi, my name is Alex Simidchiev. I'm a physician for now over 28 years. Half of that time I spent in academic clinical environment, half of that I spent in industry. And I've been a digital geek since I can remember, since the late 80s, so a long time ago, before Google was born. What I've seen is that basically I've seen what's happening in healthcare, and I can speak a little bit more about that later on. But ultimately, I think that most industries outside of the digital industry, and especially the communications industry, are playing catch up with the digital technology. So the industry is there, but what's happening is that as the technology evolves, industry changes at a slower pace, so it is always having to play catch up with the technology. And ultimately, it's identifying where the technology can add most value, because what we've seen at the beginning was there's something called the Gartner hype cycle, where any new technology is adopted over and above its usefulness. So people try to adopt it even where it doesn't add value. And then there's the trough of disillusion, where people are disillusioned with the technology because they've used it in not appropriate ways. And then there's the plateau of productivity, where people actually start using it in the appropriate place and in the appropriate manner, and it adds value to the industry. So basically, I think that the digital industry, having changed so quickly in the last couple of years, has gone through a Gartner hype cycle and is coming out in the plateau of productivity. At least that's what I can say for healthcare. So it is now leveling out and starting to be used appropriately in the places where it should be used, and not overused or underused. If it's not used enough, you miss out on value. If it's used inappropriately, you don't get the value, you just add complexity to the system. So that's why I think that we've gone through a couple of learning steps at the beginning, and now we're settling at a plateau of productivity within healthcare, where digital actually adds value.
That's great. I want to quote your words in an article from an interview you gave to a Bulgarian magazine special for healthcare, that you see the tools for physicians, every digital skill and tool to be a way to improve better, more accurate service to the patient.
Absolutely.
And what would you say the other way around? What would the patient know when they Google and go to the physician? How to handle this process? How to influence them? Because they read so much and learn a lot, and they don't get any service. They just make it worse.
Well, yeah, every strong medicine has its side effects. So when you apply the digital technology, which is strong medicine for healthcare, you can get side effects too. You have the positive effects, but you also have the side effects. That's why we need to understand where the place of each of these tools is. I will give you a physician's view of using different tools. Every physician has a stethoscope, but you don't use a stethoscope to take x-rays. You have an x-ray machine to do that. Every tool has its setting and its benefits and its shortcomings. You cannot use all the tools in the same way. Digital communication has dramatically changed. I would even say close to disrupted the way healthcare can be offered. And I think that patients are actually leading the way. The specialists, physicians, are still catching up. So patients are probably further ahead in the digital adoption curve than many of the professionals within healthcare, and that is leading to some of the challenges and some of the risks which are happening out there. Because previously in healthcare, communication was quite a one-sided thing. Physicians knew, patients needed to be told. Now, because there is a much higher level of equalization, so an equilibrium of information, so both sides have information available easily and freely through search engines, that information asymmetry is much less. But sadly, many of the patients do not know how to work with health information. And I'll give you a couple of examples how when searching for medical information online, we basically have our cognitive ability, so our brain interacting with an algorithm on the other side. So an algorithm written to make information search more easy for us. That algorithm relies on a couple of things to rank the results, one of which is actually the number of clicks. But that fact is very useful for other types of information, but not that useful for health information, because the fact that people like an information does not mean it is more healthcare relevant or useful, because the usefulness of an information is in healthcare is, does it lead to an actual improvement in health? And I'll give you a specific example. For example, there is a difference in how people absorb information, so how they want information given to them, and how information is shared by other people. So when we share information, we prefer to give the good news first and the bad news second. When we're receiving information, we prefer the bad news first and the good news second. And that is evolutionary. We want to hear the bad news so we can prepare in advance. That's how our brain works. But if you put that into healthcare context and you have a list of things which are from good diagnosis, good in quotes, and bad diagnosis, as in something severe and life-threatening, because people want to absorb the bad information first, they tend to click on the bad ones first, which gets them ranked on Google higher, which means that basically we are searching for a rash we have, and we come up with, you have cancer. Now, that disconnect between the cognitive way of functioning of our brain and the way the algorithm ranks results in healthcare can actually lead to side effects, communication side effects, one of which is called cyberchondria. It's like hypochondria, so people who are always sick of something. but it's due to the fact that they're given a range of informations and they have no way of actually professionally ranking that information in an appropriate way. They're relying on Google's algorithm, which was made for other types of information, not healthcare information, to be ranked. And so they get an inappropriate exposure to information which is irrelevant for them, but they have no way of understanding, is this relevant or not? Because crowdsourcing of information about your own condition is not always the best option. It's good in some industries. It's great for getting a large volume of information, but the relevance factor of the information needs to be curated by people who understand that information put in a specific context.
Yeah, we have the same, we would like to do the same for business. What would you say, Stan? Because also when we search for information about business results, about any graphics and other index, we would like to learn about other businesses, and the data are more and more relevant. But I don't know how, if we would apply this example that the bad results come first, all the bankrupt businesses come first in the results.
Yeah,
that would be fun.
because the bad news comes first, and because people are looking for bad news. That's interesting, because I do understand that whenever you know, sometimes when you're going out and looking for something, it's just human nature, is that you go out and you go, I'm going to go look up something about Alex. And the first thing they do is they are drawn to the bad stuff, where somebody says, oh, Alex is a terrible person. So they go, well, let me read what Alex, so it would increase the relativity. And I never thought about it from that way. I've always thought about, as Nina knows, that one of the things I've always kind of embraced is that, just because you can Google expert doesn't mean you are one. And so the fact that the insight that you're bringing is different than what I had looked at it before. I thought, what, he is talking a little, although there's little small changes, it's huge, because the fact that, if you say, somebody says, sore toe, and the next thing they know, they've got gout, because that's what they look. Oh, I've got gout, and it's not necessarily true. It's just that that's what people clicked on when they saw sore toe. The first thing they thought of is, oh, this must be bad. When instead of looking at the thing that says, have you got a splinter? They look for that. So that's actually going to be a very big. That's going to be a big challenge for not just Google, but and not just physicians. That's going to be a big challenge for everybody, because it would be very difficult to handle that algorithm, which is what what was it called, authorship. What that part, authorship and authority, that's actually what they were working on at one time, but they've kind of dropped that a little bit. It's not, they're not making that as important as it was, but it would be, from a physician standpoint, it would be more important for their rankings to be there versus, just popularity of clicks to come up with a diagnosis while that patient is looking for something. So it's really an interesting conversation for me.
One of the things I would suggest as a free suggestion to Google is to actually have a filter which can be clicked on and off. So curation of content which can be clicked on and off. If people want uncurated content, so the full availability of unordered information or information ordered only by the relevance of clicks, they can get that. But if they want something which is curated through a professional curation, so people who are within a specific industry, they can click that filter and then the results will be reordered based on the curated content. My only concern is that the amount of information we have out there is humongous. It's zettabytes of information. So curation of that amount of content would be quite difficult, if not impossible. And I believe that's why Google dropped that part of it, because the amount of information we're getting is so huge that we cannot really start getting our heads around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why we have the conversations live, because when I see all the professionals that I know personally, and I know they are top professionals and they have experience, I always urge them to write articles, to be present, because how otherwise would that content be available? Who would create it? That it's not that you are dissatisfied from the algorithm and results. And if you are good, just go and contribute. Tell what you do, at least for the part that you can give for free. Not everything, of course, because it's suiciding, but just like on a conference, when you go to present, you talk about who you are, what's your experience, what are your awards, professional.
Yeah, the challenge to that
Personal.
would be the fact that people who go to conferences are a very small subset of the people who read newspapers or read blogs. So ultimately, the vast amount of good or harm into healthcare is in the broad reality of unaided search. So search, which is native search on Google, that's where the most impact can be made, even giving small nudges in the algorithm. Because we have lots of learnings from newspapers to absorb, because newspapers have known that bad news sell more newspapers than good news for decades. But somehow Google is not thinking that way within healthcare, because within healthcare, the disbalance between good news and bad news could actually have negative healthcare effects. So if a patient who has a minor condition thinks he has a severe condition and has a depression to boot, he can actually take his own life. So having access to that information is not without side effects and long-term healthcare side effects. So ultimately, because communication in healthcare is such a strong drug, I mean, it's probably the strongest drug out there. It's communication is the way that healthcare is provided to people. If there was no communication, healthcare would be impossible.
Yeah, that's the words have very strong. The beginning were the words, like in the Bible. So we are also talking for business like that. Yeah.
In the appropriate dose and within the appropriate situational context, they would actually have more side effects than they would have positive effects. So access to that information can have negative healthcare consequences. And I don't think the FDA or the other regulatory bodies around the world have actually looked at it that way, because
I have not.
Information is extremely potent, and so it can do as much good as it can do harm.
They will close us to talk. If we have to check every word then. That's very interesting what you're saying.
The adjustment to the algorithm is going to be where the key is, though. And they have actually tried something similar to this with Null, which was the knowledge database, right? And you had to have, when you went in there, you knew that person that was actually posting those were scholars, and they were people who were in that or in that particular industry, whether it was medical or not. But this is really it's a problem, that I really had not really considered to the depth that what you're talking about here, because again, somebody they could start writing their last will and testament because they went to the bad news first.
Exactly.
And they've decided
first, because that's the way psychology works. It's the way our brain is wired evolutionary. So we're doing that not because we want to, but because evolution has selected those people who look at bad news first to have a better survival advantage than the people who are looking at the good news. So that's how evolution worked. The problem is that the algorithm on the other side does not take into account that. And when we're giving healthcare information, I don't I mean, for other types of information, it would be fine, but healthcare information takes us or makes us do things and access healthcare resources in a way which no other type of information usually does, because it's something which we are very afraid of, given the fact that it is directly related to our life. So within healthcare, I really believe that we need to have at least the opportunity to access curated content, so that we can take appropriate decisions based on it. There are, of course, several sites which offer that type of curated content. So there's a foundation called Health on the Net, HON, Health on the Network Foundation, which does exactly that. It gives us access to curated and evidence-based data, but it's a minor drop into the sea of information out there. So I don't think many people even know that it exists. The fact is that whenever a person needs professional evidence-based advice, they should either go to an expert who's in the field or look for curated content. They cannot just go and look into the sea of information and expect to find the right answer, because the fact that answers are out there does not mean that we will stumble to the right one by chance. The probability of that happening is very low.
I see, and I'm not sure that it's also relevant to any other information, because since I was on Plus Your Business Academy, I heard and also experienced a lot of disbalance while working intensely with the data, with the results, and it's affecting what we are doing, but we just skip it like it's not like a small detail. We don't pay attention, and then a lot of people end in depression. I just read an article about being a trailblazer on the net, ending with depression, because you put all your efforts and you were talking about burnout before. Yeah, I heard you that.
One of the things about burnout is it can impact the way we communicate dramatically. I mean, everybody has talked to people who are in depression, and they know that actually being around people like that influences the way we feel. So imagine if you have the net causing more depression, and people going on the net having access to people who have more depression, and from a semantic point of view, it can become huge. And people who are writing from a personal perspective, when they have a disease, they're not really happy. When you have a disease, you have a problem, and you don't think, you don't become happier once you start having healthcare problems. So if you're writing about it, having healthcare problems, you tend to give a different kind of vantage point to the posts you're doing. That can also influence other people who are looking through that information. And there's that kind of synchronicity which happens in communication, which especially, again, we need to separate out the emotional element of communication from the factual element of communication. And within healthcare, people need a balanced view of facts. One of the things which I have always tried to talk to my students when I was teaching digital healthcare in one of our universities is that ultimately physicians should catch up to the public, because I think physicians are still, because they're very busy doing clinical work, they don't go on the net often enough to curate or to tweak information so that it becomes a little bit more relevant. Because currently, if I ask one of my top colleagues, experts in the field of, let's say, lung diseases, where I'm a specialist, have you looked at the Google page for asthma? Have you Googled asthma? They will say, of course not. I know everything about it from my professional point of view. Why should I Google asthma? Which means that the whole content on the page of asthma has been curated and ordered by an algorithm that didn't know anything about asthma. They knew a lot of things about cars and banking and the weather on the other side of the Atlantic, but they didn't know anything about the medical side of the problem. They just ranked results based on the number of clicks. Can you expect to have a significant medical impact if you don't know what's out there? And that same specialist is advising patients who are looking at Google first and going to a specialist second. Dr. Google has become the #1 consultation over the world, irrespective of country. If you have a problem, medical problem, you first go to Google, then you go to a physician. But the disconnect there is that on Google, nobody curates the content, and physicians don't look at the Google pages they're actually treating because they know more information. Why would they go to Google? And so there's that disconnect, which is always happening, where patients and physicians have different amount and non-complementary information.
And do you think this is going broader, like disconnect, or is it coming closer? How do you see it?
I believe it's coming closer, but it's not coming closer fast enough, because as more and more patients start Googling and seeing that it actually doesn't help that much. It's great to get that information and to be prepared in a wide range of subjects, but it doesn't actually help you go forward. There are only a minority of reports, which usually get expressed more on the net, of people who have found their diagnosis on the internet. 90% of diagnostic procedures which are actually leading to better patient outcomes are happening in clinical offices, where you have the range of examination procedures and diagnostic algorithms and evidence-based ways of working. You cannot expect, to just put your finger in the net somewhere and find whatever you were looking for. Most of the really good outcomes in healthcare information search and communication out there, because the information on the net is great. I'm not advocating against it, not in the least. I'm advocating for it. I'm just advocating that it should be curated in an appropriate way, and people should know what to expect of this medium of communication, because you cannot expect to find the right information just by putting your finger, putting 3 keywords and hitting enter. The people who use information on the net to the highest possible benefit are usually people with chronic diseases who have been searching for a number of years, and they have found their own algorithm to navigate the healthcare information ocean. So they know the tiny differences that another keyword can make, or the relevance of results from specific sources which might not be ranked very high. They might be on page 5 or page 6, but they are the relevant resources because they give an insight which is different than the results ranked in popularity on page 1.
But what then, if you are saying for information, that doesn't mean communication.
Yeah, true.
So it would be best if physicians and professionals, lawyers, businessmen start talking like we do now.
Absolutely.
So then it will be a communication, human to human, and you will start making bridges for what you listen, what you learn.
The challenge to that is the amount of information out there, the zettabytes of information out there, because we're so inundated with information, we don't actually take the time to assess its relevance. Yes, we understand it and we kind of keep it like hamsters, collecting a lot of things, but we don't order it in our head to understand what is the really important part of it. And very few people actually take care to filter out all the noise on the net, because there is an immense amount of noise, and the signal to noise ratio is not getting any better, because as more and more big data is out there, we have data expanding in 3 dimensions. We have data expanding in volume, we have data expanding in velocity, so the speed of information is increasing, and we have information which is increasing in variety. So it's the volume, velocity, and variety of information that is exploding in all 3 dimensions. So,
well, that's just not on the internet. Apparently, I had a failure to communicate with my son who came in last night not to cut the grass this morning. So there's this, it's just noise. That's why I muted myself, because I'm trying to listen and not interrupt too, because these kind of conversations are really, really important. But the filter that you're talking about the first thing I thought of was the incognito feature, but that's really not it. There has to be another, whether it's a tag or, well, it's like the RSCAA filter. That people, they really didn't pay attention to that either. So that's part of the problem. Is that how do you get those done? Because the internet teaches people how to do things. That's what they think. They say it teaches me how to do things, and they have all of this respect for their industry, but they don't have a respect for somebody else's industry. So therefore you have people who are practicing in the industry of, say, creating sites or blogs or things like that, which I think they should do. I think that's great, but Google and search engines needs to pay more attention to the fact that those meta tags or do more education about what those tags actually are. And it's not, you can't just say Google. I mean, it's everything, because the disinformation, which is different than misinformation, is incredible, really, when you start looking at it. So, because sometimes you do a search and not just in health information, but anything, you come up with the results and you go, I didn't know that. And so you have to go check it out, and you find out that it's some information that's been put in there by Happy Frank, who owns a trailer park in Kissimmee, Florida, and he's giving health, advice on stuff, which is possible if he's gone through that, but a lot of times he hasn't. It's other disinformation that he's received from people. So this is going to be, for me, it's going to be interesting to watch that, because I'm especially at that age where you begin to have more of those things, and you go, what is this? There's never a week that a new ache doesn't come up or something like that. So are you proposing that that physicians create some sort of digital advisory board to be able to, talk with Google or talk with search engines about things like this?
Oh, I think that Google has already embarked on that journey, because they have understood that health information has more consequence, as in health-related consequences, than the general information. So they're embarking on a way to somehow start curating that content, or at least adding an element of expertness around that. How that will happen, to tell you the truth, I don't know, because it's an evolving piece of work, and I don't know the way they're tackling it. I know how important it is, and I know how far-fetched that would be, because as time passes, the importance of healthcare increases, doesn't decrease. As life expectancy increases, we get more and more people into later stages of life, because the birth rate is approximately the same or a little bit increasing. What's actually happening is, as life expectancy increases, we get a larger proportion of people in their later age, which increases the amount of healthcare support they need. So healthcare will become more and more important the more and more successful it is, if you understand where I'm going. And I have seen that when I actually did an engram, so a Google engram of the words health and wealth. And basically wealth was a flat line. So people have always talked about wealth ever since the 1700s. But the word health has started dramatically increasing since the 60s of last century. So about 50 some odd years ago, because that's when healthcare actually started to pick up. And that's when life expectancy started to increase and people started paying more attention. So now healthcare is about 10 times more used as a word, if we trust Google Ngram, about 10 times more used as a word than the word wealth. So when you say health is wealth, actually health has become the new wealth, and it's increasing in importance as we speak. And having an appropriate informational context around that is really, really important.
Okay, you went into depth. I forgot to take a note about my question. Yeah, it's really very interesting for things that we don't usually. We all the time on the net, but we just don't pay attention.
Tim, have you seen Tim's comment over there? If you can address that, it says word of mouth way better. Okay, what?
Yeah, word of mouth. I remembered what I would say. Recently, I've not searched and taken notes from any sites that I don't have very clear details about the author and the expert and the professional. I think it's already, I don't know, maybe a year and more. If I Google and have results, I check everything I know from I have already some like checklist, and if I don't recognize the person behind that, the professional, I just don't open the results.
Well, that has all its positives, but also can have its negatives, because the fact that you don't know the expert does not make him an expert. So you might as easily miss out as actually be safe from accessing that information. Ultimately, again, I'm speaking about the Gartner hype cycle. So the peak of expected or inflated expectations, which I think we're beginning to go through. We shouldn't go into the trough of disillusionment, because the information available on the net related to healthcare is a great resource. It can do a lot of good. It is only how it is being used that needs to be tweaked a little bit, and not massively tweaked, because if we tweak massively, we might go off on a tangent. These things require nudging, so small changes that actually lead in the right direction. What we need to understand is where the right direction is, which is, yes, we can have a great conversation out there, and we can use the crowd, the power of the crowd, but there needs to be some kind of goalpost, or at least a reference point, which has been established by the current understanding or the current expertise. Because, I mean, physicians are not ideal. We also have our own shortcomings. We also have a limitation of the information we have, and our knowledge evolves as science evolves. So today, for example, we believe something, tomorrow it might be something different, and that's okay, as long as we actually take a scientific approach, so a structured approach at how we process information. For example, I can talk about a subject like homeopathy. Homeopathy was very positive when it was made about 250 years ago, because at that time all physicians did was bloodletting. You had polycythemia, which means high amount of red blood cells. They did bloodletting, which helped a lot. You have anemia, which is a low blood cell count, and they bloodlet again, and then basically you die. So they had only a tool of bloodletting, and that's what they did because they thought they were making something useful at the time. We have since evolved a very significant amount based on science in medicine, and we know that bloodletting works in only a very minute amount of medical conditions. But homeopathy, which at that time was very positive because it actually made people not do bloodletting, currently is still being used when we know there are bacteria, viruses, we know the genome and everything else, and it's still that 250-year-old methodology is used with the same fervor as it was 250 years ago. That I cannot understand. So it's not about the fact that we know everything, we don't. But the fact is that we have a scientific approach and a critical reasoning and critical thinking around the information we process as experts. So probably the most beneficial or the most useful thing an expert has versus a layperson in a specific area is the criticality of thinking. So the way they can filter out something which does not really match with the body of evidence. And it's that level of filtering which can be included in a conversation. It doesn't have to be included, but it can be included. So it can be a switch to turn on and off based on your preference. If I want to see curated and expert ranked information, I want to be able to click a switch and be able to see the search results through the eyes of an expert.
So you're talking about being able to see it as someone else versus being able to see like an unfiltered result based off of like incognito mode or something like that. But what's interesting is that I'm going to go back to what Nina said about she goes to check to see what somebody's authority is. But the truth is that some of the people who are are very, very, very educated and understand what those issues are with healthcare or whatever a specific health, concern might be. They never touch the net because they're so focused on what they're doing. That's all they care about.
Exactly.
So somehow what you're saying is that needs to be expressed to them in a way that they do care and become involved and find a way to be able to get that information out there, or the technical people need to figure out a way. Thinking is key. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna address this from Tim. Thinking is key, not internet marketing skills. Actually, internet marketing skills are going to fall a great deal into the solution to this, Tim. I mean, I get what you're saying. I understand that marketing skills should not figure into the equation, but they absolutely are going to have to, because the pharmaceutical companies that you refer to have those marketing skills and use them way up here, where the physician who might have the solution for it uses it way down here.
Marketing is a tool. Marketing is not the activity. It is the tool to use. So marketing can help information go from the source where it's staying currently to the recipient who needs it most. Because ultimately, my belief of a sales process, any sales process, is not about pushing the product out there. It's about exposing the product to the people who need it most. So that's true value transfer happens when you actually can offer the information or the product you have to the people that need it most or who can benefit from it most. That's what true marketing from my perspective is. So actually, I would say that we shouldn't blame marketing for some of the results that have happened based on the fact that marketing has been used inappropriately in some cases. So it's not marketing's fault that marketing was used inappropriately.
Actually, the marketing people need to figure out how to come up with another term for marketing when they're talking to the physicians about what they're actually doing there. Exactly. Because that would help them understand, okay, they're really not talking about selling stuff. They're just talking about people, getting exposure to the correct information. Yeah. Versus
ultimately, marketing and selling are two different things, but they have come to be branded under the same, trying to push something. And it's not about the push. It's actually about the appropriate channel where you can get the relevant information from the source to the recipient in the shortest and most efficient way. And everybody, even as we speak now, everybody is trying to sell something, an idea. The idea I'm trying to sell currently is the fact that we need a way to structure information more than just relying on the fact that people are clicking on hyperlinks to get relevant healthcare information. I believe that we have a better way to navigate through the ocean of information out there, especially in healthcare. That's the idea I'm trying to sell. And I am trying to sell it because I believe that if somebody buys it, we will get a better health outcome based on that. And I don't have a problem with selling that information. I'm not trying to push something which somebody else doesn't need. I believe that if that information is widely available, people will actually have a healthcare benefit based on that. They will start to think in a slightly different way and approach information searching and information retrieval from the ocean of information out there a little bit more appropriate to their medical condition.
Yeah, you have to. Well, it's really complex.
He's asking why not free them? Why not free them?
It's free. I mean, what the internet has given freedom of everybody to do and to talk and to write whatever they want to, which is fine. I'm not against that at all, in the least. The fact is that for people who actually want to achieve a benefit, they must have an evidence-based way of approaching how they search and find relevant information if they so desire. It's not about forcing people to do something. It's about allowing them to access that information in a more structured way, because people are very much different. Some people are very analytical. Some people are very expressive. And if I'm an analytical person, I want to be able not to have to troll through the internet until I receive my revelation 5 months down the line that basically what I was searching for 4 months was useless. I want to be able to have the expertise, to use the expertise of somebody else who has done that before me and can do it in a much more structured way.
Yeah. So we have also to educate the professionals to be present, or at least some of them, because not all of them. People are different, yeah. But some of them need to understand that it's important to be online, to have these events to talk.
Medicine. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with the courses of digital medicine I have started in my home country. Because unless we start at the university level or even younger, but the university level is a good start, of educating physicians that the digital channels have a very important role to play in the future of healthcare, we cannot expect people who only have a Facebook account or go to Google every time they want to search something to be experts in the field like they should be when they're professionals. The medical use of the internet is a professional activity that people need to have a competency in. So medical professionals need to have a medical competency of using information on the net, much like normal physician-patient communication skills, or how to communicate bad news. Physicians are trained to do that, but they're not trained on how to use the internet to actually give that expertise back to the net. And that is something I'm trying to change in a small kind of way with a nudge. And hopefully talks like this will get the information to a wider audience, so that people will start realizing that we need to address this fact in a much more structured and evidence-based fashion if we're to achieve any meaningful health improvement through the net. Because now we're just doing random movements. It's Brownian movements. We're not having a specific forward movement on information exchange on the net. We're kind of thinking it'll happen by itself, self-organizing. It won't.
I would say that we need like standard to be established for education. The digital skills, communication especially, have to be part of the educational system in any school, in any profession. Because it comprises a lot. Yeah, a lot. It's not just Googling. It's a lot more. Like understanding.
Tim's got a lot of. He's got some interesting comments over there. They're hard to address in such a short period of time, which is one of the things we're talking about too. Is that this has to actually be it needs to be implemented as quickly as possible and diligently, because without it, the disinformation is just going to continue to grow. But some of the things that he's talking about here are really interesting in that you agree with them, but they're not implementable. You know, the thing about the lab marketing tool, those guys have $1 billion at their hands. That's how they began this thing, right? They have $1 billion behind them. So that's a little different from a doctor who may be. I mean, a lot of people think doctors are incredibly wealthy, but that's not true. Not all of them are. Some of the ones are working away and struggling away just like we do, because they are focused on the cure for. It could be the cure for baldness. I mean, they could be working on something that they're so focused on that the rest of this thing just doesn't matter to them. So it's it's going to be really kind of interesting, and I think that the onus can't be put specifically on the search engines. This has to be the coming together of a lot of different professionals in order to accomplish this, especially in the educational field, because the educational field in the physicians' classrooms should be discussing this.
Yeah.
Look, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go out there and you're going to tell somebody that you're going to give them a diagnosis, and they're going to say, "That's not true, doc. I just Googled it." Right?
Yeah.
and then the doctor's going to go, "What's Google?" Some of them won't even know that, but this is going to be really interesting. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you.
It's happening also in sales. Like, my husband has a small retail workshop, and they come and say, I want these tires, winter tires, like, I want these summer tires, Nokian, and Nokian is producing winter. They are not good for summer, for example. I'm just, telling stories now, because I'm not the expert for selling tires, but there's just not a useless communication, because usually if they come, they would listen to the expert first and then take this informed decision. And now they come and they already know everything and don't listen. And so there's no communication.
Yeah, the actual communication channel has actually throttled the ability to communicate. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that they've already made their mind up when they come in that this is the tire that they want, or that this is the disease that they have, or that this is the type of widget that they want. And so then the expert is sitting there going, what am I supposed to tell you now? Because you've already made your mind up, and that actually harms communication rather than moves it forward. So, wow.
Absolutely. That is exactly the root of the problem that we were discussing today, because the breakdown of communication is when somebody who's not an expert comes to the expert's office and says, "You're not an expert. I'm the expert because I searched it."
Right.
That's the root of the problem, and that's where the frustration of the medical profession is. But I see the frustration in part because they haven't actually approached it in a meaningful way, as in understand where the problem is and start dealing with it, because we need to deal with that problem, and we cannot expect the public to start dealing with it, because the public is not the expert. The experts should be dealing with that problem, and we should teach physicians how to handle Google type objections. And I don't mean only the Google, it could be the Yahoos and the whatever search engines out there. That's the Alta Vistas.
Yeah, Alta Vista.
Yeah. Then I remember, Alex, you told me once when we are discussing a similar situation that I want to sell something, but I communicate through devices, and then you answer me also through devices. You said, my device is talking to your device, and it doesn't mean anything. This is not any communication, because it's like Star Wars game.
Yeah, I can remember. I mean, we can end the conversation on a positive note when I tell you a joke where there was this patient who was telling his physician, "Doc, I don't know what I have. I have a problem, but everywhere I touch, I touch here and there's pain. I touch here and there's pain. I touch here and there's pain. What do I have?" And how would a layman approach this, and how would a physician approach this? A layman would say, well, there might be, a chronic disease which is causing pain all over the body. A physician would say, well, actually, you have a broken finger, so it kind of hurts.
Yeah. So we have a broken finger on the Google search. Or any search. Okay. So, Stan, would you? Oh, it just dropped. But during these conferences you have, is anyone addressing the digital communication in healthcare?
Sadly, no. What is happening is that physicians are looking towards the clinical outcomes, not the informational ones, because they're not experts in communication. They're experts in a clinical field and not in communication, physician-patient communication. So the people who could look at this are people in the media and people in the communications industries, and they're not interested in healthcare because they see that's not their area of expertise. What I would really like to see is a kind of a blend, a mix of people in communications and in healthcare come together to understand and unravel these problems, because there's significant healthcare problems out there based on communication, not the clinical aspect of it and not the expertise.
Yeah, here what I see in the program, because we have elections, in Bulgaria, they put this program about early diagnosis, which is good because it's part of a new service for people who live in far distance, and they can get signals for the health status and then get the service. But this is just an extended digital way to monitor the health of a person. It's not for the topic we are talking. It's just a good example of digital being useful, like devices and systems. But this, I know there are a lot of other topics in healthcare, like anything digital in the systems. It's a big revolution and another conversation.
Yeah.
Is Stan not coming back? I will be waiting a bit for him. And we will close this. We are almost 1 hour, which is a bit longer than we expected, but it's a lot we learned from you. And thank you. Yeah. What is the topic for the university you would run?
Actually, I was doing a course on physician-patient communication, and I am weaving in the digital elements of that, because physicians need to be aware of all the opportunities to help in healthcare with the digital tools. For example, they need to know where to use most appropriately video teleconferencing for improving health outcomes. And it's not for every patient and it's not for every situation, but there are situations where actually having a video consultation is useful and beneficial for the treatment process. The same for mHealth, for mobile health, and for using. We have probably 130,000 apps in the respective repositories on Android and on iOS, which have something to do with health. Many of them are totally unproven. The ones that are proven don't have the uptake or the usage they should, because they're not marketed appropriately. And so we have quite a big disconnect between the opportunities offered by the digital revolution or the digital change in our environment and what is actually happening in healthcare.
Yeah. Would you bring the students here on Blab for 25-minute discussion after the end? Yeah, like a closing for the conversation. That would be nice for them to experience.
The only problem is that I'm doing this because there's a big time difference between where I am currently and the university where they're studying. So 7 time zones of difference. What I'm doing is I'm actually making small sessions, about 15 minutes, recording them and having them watch the content asynchronously. So whenever they want to watch it in their own free time. And all we do after that is kind of discuss on the topics which have been raised in an offline mode, so in an email or via a chat function. But I would happily bring them over on Blab. Blab is great for sharing ideas and for exchanging information in an open format. In small groups, which are exceeding the number 4, the information exchange tends to drop off. So the biggest information exchange is. And
we can do a rotary, like say you stay here for 5 minutes or 3 minutes, then who's the host and the co-host can regulate this, look after it.
Yeah.
So what university? Alex is in Michigan University, yeah, as far as I know.
No, I'm currently in Toronto, but the university I'm referring to is Plovdiv Medical University. It's a town back home where I come from, Bulgaria, and I have authored digital medicine there.
Hi, Zach.
How are you going?
Hi, Zach.
You know what?
I will keep that seat for Stan Bush, sorry, Cooper, because we just waiting for him. He dropped and we want to close the conversation. So I hope Stan gets back, sorry.
Okay. I hope it's been a useful conversation, and we have gotten the information there that we have a significant amount of work to do if we want to improve communication in healthcare, and it's the responsibility of both the experts and the public to do their respective piece of work. The public to
exactly
expert advice, and the experts to actually go online and offer that advice online, because currently many alluded to that. They're not online. They're so busy doing the clinical part of the healthcare that they're not online, and so there becomes a disbalance of information. The more busy a physician is, the more expert he is, the less probable it is that he will be online and doing something to improve the digital communication within healthcare.
Yeah, we would be happy with the circadians and myself to host more and more conversation with professionals in business, in art. I also have connections with people who do arts, because from my experience, I've been doing this the last 2 years more intensely. Unless they go here, and it's also a feeling how it goes for you, how do you relate and talk to people, what skills you develop. Then when you are into it, you get the experience and you figure it out, the meaning of this tool, because they are professional tools, new standard for your work, and then you get used to using them, to applying them, implementing into certain points of the daily processes.
I like Tim's comments about the motivation and the fact that they don't get paid for doing that. The fact is that many of the top clinicians receive adequate reimbursement for what they are currently doing. So the clinical element of it, if they could understand how important it is to actually get the relevant information out there, I think that a large proportion of them would engage, because physicians choose a profession, the medical profession, based on two things. One of which, obviously, is the fact that they can make a living out of it. But the second part is because they actually love helping people. And you choose certain professions based on the way your psychology works. If you want to help people, you tend to go towards humanitarian professions, and one of the foremost ones is medicine. Of course, financial motivation is an important factor, far from thinking it's not. But we also need to make them aware, make a large proportion of the clinicians out there aware of how much good they can actually contribute outside of what is currently making them money, which is their clinical work. Many of the things which have happened in the open source arena out there have happened. So who wanted to have a purpose and to do good actually contributed. if you think about the operation systems, for example, the Linux and the Microsofts of this world, Microsoft is a commercial enterprise and it has been very successful. But 90% of the servers out there run Linux, and nobody paid Linux to become Linux. It was open source people who had a common purpose doing something good. And if we can start something like this within the healthcare information arena, it would be great, and it would be better than having somebody being paid to make information on the net better, because that motivation only goes a certain way.
Mhm.
I have to apologize to Nina because I came back without my.
What happened to you? Just 1 minute.
What happened is the visit from my kids this weekend, and one of them unplugged my router. So I was getting prepared to go figure out what had happened somewhere else, because I was misdirected, right? That's exactly what disinformation does, even in the medical search thing, is that I thought, well, everything's run fine for a long time, so there must be something else going on. So this is going to take a while, or there was some disconnection somewhere other than the something simple. And so I went ahead and got ready for Saturday.
Okay. No, we're just continuing because we have interesting questions. Unfortunately, Tim is in public restaurant. Otherwise, we could have wider panel discussion. And we were talking about bringing the group of students here on a rotation organization, doing them like a demonstration. How would they communicate when they have this experience? It would make a difference, I think. At least they would know how people come, ask you, just use the platform.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and watch the replay on the section that I missed, because I can see there were several conversations about in the arena of how the payment works and things like that in this stuff, because that is going to have some bearing on how all this stuff works out, like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have the Saturday open for these conversations because Alex is on a tough schedule. If we can continue until New Year, it's also difficult, but we can do it in the circadian way. Close it to half an hour. Sorry for keeping you too long today. But also it's the first time we meet on that subject, and it's very interesting. So I hope you're not dissatisfied. And
me?
No, I'm just testing if you are listening.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were talking to me or Alex, but no, the conversation is really, this stuff is important, and it's going to be interesting. And I won't be able to be here every Saturday, just like Alex and yourself. It's going to have to. It's probably not going to be able to make it. So what you have to do is put together some sort of a group to start that conversation. And it's going to. But to do that, you have to also go into the whole planning session of, okay, exactly who do you want to be there, and exactly, because it's not necessarily a physician, although there should certainly be in that conversation 100%, but there has to be other outside resources too that are like, well, I'm in the educational industry and even restaurant industry, because that restaurant industry, they've been taught that when somebody is choking, that you do the Heimlich maneuver on them, because that's what they searched and found out. It must be this, when that may not necessarily be what's actually going on. So everybody has to have some sort of insight as to this. It'll be interesting, especially for the younger generation.
Okay, so we will close now, and we will work it out how to proceed, spread news, and have a group to talk, like on once or twice a month, something like that. We'll have to figure it out.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Tim. You have contributed to the conversation very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Tim.
I agree.
Are you going to stop the recording and continue to talk